welcome to Warehouse Wizards. It's a podcast powered by Optiorix in which we explore the hot topics in the warehousing industry with some industry experts. And today we have the honor to have one of the leading experts in Belgium, Stefan Rusu from Deloitte. For the people who don't know you, could you give a small background on who you are and what exactly you do?
With pleasure. Thank you very much for having me this afternoon. I'm part of the supply chain and network operations organization at Deloitte, where I lead the European Center of Excellence for Warehousing and Automation, where we not only design, optimize, and implement distribution centers with or without automation, but we also look into the more entertaining, sometimes advanced technologies that I'm sure we're going to talk a bit more about today.
Okay, thank you for a brief introduction. What do you think the most common challenges are within the warehousing industry?
Well, what's interesting there is that they're classical problems. They're problems of finding and maximizing efficiency, maximizing, if I'm to summarize it, customer experience while minimizing cost. But at the same time, identifying new value-adding technologies that can potentially really supercharge an operation. So classical problems on one hand, but on the other hand, also identifying hyper-modern technologies that can boost operations significantly while closing the circle at the same efficiency scope.
All right, makes sense. What do you think the biggest trends are nowadays in warehousing?
You're going to have to bear with me, but I'm going to repeat the efficiency part. Mm-hmm. The focus on efficiency is always a constant. The focus on cost is always a constant, which is more around the what, right? Mm-hmm. But if you think about the how, there is a clear investment that has been so for the past many decades into warehouse automation. And what's interesting there, even if for the past almost half a century, we had these large automated systems that are prevalent all over Western and Central Europe, North America, and so forth, for the past, I'll say, half a decade or more, we do see a strong advent in robotics. And there we have your AGVs, your smarter cousins, the AMRs, all sorts of articulated robotics, picking, packing, sorting, and so forth, which give us an interesting new dimension to warehouse automation, a dimension of easy scalability, a dimension of modularity to these systems, a dimension of transferability between processes, and even between facilities. So this may sound very good, very promising, but this modular automation also brings additional challenges to the table. On one hand, because there are many different types of robots we can use across many different types of processes, but also from really a gigantic amount of vendors, some more traditional in the space, some more startups in the space, which make the selection of the right solution for the right problem a significant challenge.
Yep.
But then also operating day to day, when you have a multitude of robots, a multitude of other automation technologies in a warehouse that also may see quite a lot of human activity as well, your classical FTE. A big problem which is prevalent there is what we call today orchestration. So how do you make sure that the right amount and the right work reaches the right resources at the right time?
Yeah,
that's an additional challenge that we have and a big nut to crack in logistics.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, automation, everybody's talking about it. On the other hand, we see that if we look at the numbers, 80% of the warehouses still have no automation at all. So it's an interesting topic. You also see sometimes on LinkedIn, a very nice post passing by of robots doing flip-flops. But then if they enter a warehouse building and they need to take a small step, they just block. Yeah. So interesting to see. Do you think if you look at automation that sometimes companies move too fast into automation as well? Like sometimes do you think they need to focus more on improving the current processes in collaboration with fine-tuning parameters at the WMS before moving towards an automation project, or how do you see that?
You make a fair point with your question, because we can always think lean and Six Sigma before looking at the multi-million investment in automation. So for sure, that is I would say, rather logical step to take. However, many companies do perceive automation as a bit of a silver bullet to all of the problems and all of the challenges on the floor. But of course, going into automation has its certain prerequisites and then very clear business problems that it needs to solve before really jumping into it. But it's okay to have it as a North Star. But probably on the way to automation, there could be non-automated optimizations that are possible.
Yeah, okay, makes sense. Another big topic is AI. Everybody's talking about it. Many different use cases. Do you think it's already being applied in warehousing as well? Because you've got different types of AI, of course, but where do you think AI can help within this specific industry?
Well, let me start off my answer with a bit of a data nugget there. Because, AI as a term, as a concept, has been invented in the mid to late 50s.
That's right, yeah.
Right. And coincidentally, because this is, of course, a warehousing podcast, that period was also when the first ever high bay was launched into operation. So warehouse automation and AI were born in the same century and even the same decade, which is quite interesting to remember. And now probably we'll see how they evolved in parallel, but I think we're approaching a moment when they're going to start working together closer and closer. Because even if a lot of warehouses these days are still rather archaic, from a perspective of infrastructure, from a perspective of technologies, there are many, many systems that use AI, and it is likely we may not even be aware of it. I gave the example before of AMR, so autonomous mobile robots. The AI part is in the autonomous word there. And it refers to vision-powered AI or AI-powered vision systems that allow these robots to autonomously navigate, find their way optimally, recalculate their way, figure out their way within warehouses on a daily basis. That's AI. You have AI in, for instance, quality-related systems, also based on vision. I think you have a certain form of AI even in dimensioning your own products, also based on vision.
That's right. Yeah.
Systems. These are just some basic examples, but you can of course push into the Gen AI space around documentation, search, information finding, summarizing, dashboarding. A lot of interesting applications that are perfectly possible today, so they don't represent untouchable innovation.
This AI component, is it mostly used in more manual warehouses or more in the automated warehouse, or both of them? How do you see that?
If you think about the automated warehouses that use a lot of robotics, then AI is there. It helps robots understand and perceive their environment, even those that pick products, but also make certain decisions on how to handle the work that they have been given. You can also look at a non-automated facility where AI can bring various optimization routines, because if it's a non-automated facility, that doesn't make it a non-complex facility. You can have facilities of, think Europe, 50, 60,000 square meters, North America, 200,000 square meters or more, which are fully manual, extremely complex facilities, right, with hundreds of people, where you do need to do that. I mentioned the word before, that orchestration, sometimes in real time, of that perfect distribution of work to product to person, right, which begins to be a bit more complicated for us to handle on a spreadsheet or in real-time mental maths, specifically thinking about even how the market evolves, right? Customer expectations are higher, the orders are getting more complex, the lead times are getting smaller, so our reaction time is, as operators, is getting much shorter as well, and under challenge.
Yeah, makes sense. You already touched upon a subject like Europe versus the US. Do you see like a big difference there in sizes of warehouses or automation versus manual?
We in Europe have a bigger challenge of space. So that constraint often pushes us into the automation direction, primarily from a condensed storage perspective. That's not to say that, of course, there's no automation in North America. There's plenty of it, but there the problem they're solving is more a problem of throughput. So volume of throughput and complexity of throughput versus what we're solving in Europe, which is condensed storage plus throughput. And then underlying these, I think both the geographies do face a similar challenge of talent. So identifying, maintaining, and then successfully developing workforce in the space of warehousing. To which, if I may add an additional thought, it's interesting because the challenge with workforce has been in the media, in logistics for quite a lot of years. But I was always very curious to understand why are we facing that, because it's not like we've built so many warehouses and the population hasn't grown proportionally. And I'm mentioning this specifically because we're on this digital topic. And if I strongly do believe that the challenge in logistics talent is a generational challenge.
Okay.
Because if for instance, I would be used to, for instance, going into a warehouse, picking up one of those bulky RF guns and maybe a sheet of paper and going picking some products while I walk, I could live with that. Right? Imagine some of our much younger colleagues in the field that have been exclusively born and bred in the full digital era. Right? So if you put them into a fully manual warehouse and you give them a paper and you go, check off, here's a list of picks to do, go ahead, push our trolley and do it. The retention may be rather short-lived.
Yeah,
maybe
sense.
not even the attraction would be there. And this is what I find the whole technological transformation of warehouses a particular interest, to also make it an appealing type of environment for the younger generations as well. Because if it's software driven, you have cobotics, you work alongside advanced, well-protected, friendly machinery, not the one that scares you and you run you over. But then you feel that you are immersed in a deeply technology-driven environment, then of course, even for myself, that would be attractive. And I'm not trying to say that I'm only a pen and paper type of person. But especially for the young generations, I really do believe it will close this talent gap rather quickly.
Yeah, makes sense. I think we've also seen a shift from working with fixed people towards more the temporary setup. You got some people who stay for a longer period of time, but then there's a big tendency towards I just want to use workforce whenever I need them, in terms of capacity management. So yeah, do you think technology can play a role there to speed up that process?
For sure. If you create, let's call them, speaking of user experience, user interfaces that guide the operators, that guide the people, even supervisors, because they will get that complicated control tower dashboard, for instance. But think about the picking operation. You have the operator on the floor that needs to, that gets from the warehouse management system just a list of 30 lines with different products, and so okay, just
go ahead and stack and
go ahead and do the picking. And you know what? While you're at it, please make sure that you create one single pallet, not two. A pallet that is as dense as possible, that is as stable as possible. But please also make sure, Mr. Operator or Mrs. Operator, that you do that in the shortest possible route, so shortest possible amount of time spent on that pallet.
Yes.
So from an engineering perspective, this is a multi-dimensional problem, right? That they have to solve for 8 hours a day, right? Sometimes in real time, sometimes they need to recalculate because they get to a certain location and there's no product there, so they need to short it. What does that mean for the rest? So they have to do that. If they're picked to a pallet, for instance, they have to do that mental math while driving a heavy piece of machinery in an otherwise very busy warehouse. So from a well-being perspective and safety perspective, this is quite dangerous to do, right? And a lot of people would have a long time to get used to and to get to the performance of this, right? To the expected performance. And yeah, if you're thinking about peaks, if you're thinking about seasonal stuff, it is, and I'm going to use it metaphorically, 1,000,000 times better, right? To have a user experience of all sorts of such optimizing apps that basically guarantee a route to performance, to top performance in, I would generalize and say, days instead of weeks.
Yeah, all right, makes sense. Getting back to the automation topic, when do you think there's an ROI for automation, and when is there not an ROI?
The ROI for automation is exclusively I'll say, a volume-driven business, and it can be a volume of storage. So how much do I need to store, which impacts the size of the building I'm going to need. But also the volume of throughput that my facility needs to generate. Inbound and primarily outbound throughput. So how many orders do I need to satisfy within the unit of time? The higher these two, of course, the bigger the opportunity for automation, into which I'll have to add, building on what we were discussing before, the cost of talent. Because, for instance, maybe we do a comparison, again, the Americas versus Europe, in function of what the mission of that warehouse is, right? Because it could be a large regional distribution center, which you can put in the middle of the field somewhere. Maybe that's more affordable. But the closer you get, imagine as a comparative scenario to a big city, right? The cost of real estate also goes up. And I think it goes up rather significantly more in Europe. Right? So we may get the challenge of space. We want to condense it and automate it the closer we get. And if you think about talent, coming back to Europe, there is clearly a business case which is improved in Western and Central Europe because the cost of an FTE can be 10 times higher than if you go to Eastern Europe, for example.
Yeah, makes sense.
Right. So these are, let's say, the three dimensions that build up a good business case for automation, and they relate to capacity, throughput, and talent.
To challenge that a bit, we've seen mainly 3PLs who have like very volatile seasons. For example, in Black Friday periods, you see a very big increase in volume. And then they hit the limits of ASRS systems, for example. So they cannot have the throughput they would like during that period, because the rest of the year they're at a lower volume. So then I think it's not always that interesting to go into automation, or how do you look at that?
Correct. Well, when we design an automated solution, I think generally in the business, I mean, that type of yearly analysis, that volatility across the year of your peaks is a very critical element to look at. But sometimes indeed one peak or a couple of peaks per year are so high compared to the typical average, or even the average in a standard deviation on top, that the system will indeed not be able to handle that. In which case there are some ways to go about it. Indeed is, realistically throw more people at it, right? Which brings us to what we were discussing before, but throw them in a smart way, help them deliver that performance, because, more bodies on the floor, but you're not helping them help you. You're still not going to get that performance out.
Indeed, and congestion increase.
Correct. It's just going to be confusion and congestion. Yeah, indeed. So it's definitely a case for people here. But of course, numbers are behind all of it. So can your installation handle the peak? We can simulate that. We can see how much of it. But imagine it's such a high peak in which you just bring more manual operations. It's extremely valuable to give them the right tools to do it correctly. Which is also an interesting space for robotics. So coming a bit back to that, we mentioned it's a very scalable technology. So from that respect, there are many vendors out there, and even many financial institutions that support vendors that don't do it directly, that do as a service.
As a service,
Automation as a service, robotics as a service. And when you know the peak is coming, because generally, even if the peak is very, very big, it's coming, and you kind of feel, right, you can predict a bit where that would be going this year versus last year, so you know how much resource you need, right? So in that case of as a service robotics, you basically increase your fleet temporarily, handle the peak, send the robots back, pay your invoice, and get ready for the next one.
Makes sense. I've seen the LinkedIn post recently, and it was about robotics and warehousing, and the market is growing at a relatively fast pace, but the margins are very, very thin, and they all have big losses, these robotics companies. Perhaps that's because of the as a service setup they are promoting, right?
It's a very asset intensive business, and it's not yet a mature type of business. When it becomes the norm and everybody will rent robots like they rent forklifts, I would suspect that's where the payback will come.
Okay.
So it's understandable why they struggle today, and also understandable why we see over the past few years, several years, a significant increase of venture capital investments in the warehouse automation space, which is quite exciting to see.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. Another topic: warehouse digital twins.
Yes.
I'm currently in a group of the Flemish Institute of Logistics. And one of the first brainstorms or discussions that we had is, what is a digital twin? Everybody looks at it from a different perspective. So I'm very curious about your perspective, Stefan.
Yeah, I'm smiling because digital twin was, in my experience over the past years, in the Humpty Dumpty story, when, basically something is something because you really wish it very hard to be. I've seen so many interpretations of what a digital twin is that sometimes significantly overused. I mean, I've seen, and I'll get to the definition, but I've seen, for instance, SCADA suppliers saying that what they're delivering is a digital twin. I've seen VR environment builders that they said they're building a digital twin. Also simulation companies that just make standalone simulations saying that they're a digital twin. Which is a bit incorrect from my humble opinion. I'm a bit of a purist in terms of applying engineering definitions, which I hope is correct. But in principle, a digital twin is a mathematical, physical representation of an otherwise physical object or process, which, very importantly, is permanently linked to that object or process by an exchange of data, live data, which is data measured in the real life about that object or process or entire facility, that constantly gets ingested into this mathematical physical model powered by AI and compares the actual state of the real object or process to an ideal state, which is embedded in the design of that twin. So based on this constant comparison, the machine learning embedded in the twin can actually start predicting what will happen if we still run that machine at this particular rate, or if we still keep on operating that process in its current configuration. And the interesting bit is that this predictiveness gives us a very unique ability to look into the future, right, and address not only problems that can arise today, but also opportunities that our brains can't identify anymore in this myriad of systems, data, challenges, events, and so forth. And we just can't paste them together as well as an AI could, for it.
And then what happens? So if the digital twin is able to predict what should happen, then there's a feedback loop towards current system being used, or is it just like the single source of truth?
The purist's definition. So the technical definition is that the digital twin should indeed have an autonomous active loop back. So for example, if I have a digital twin orchestrating my fleet of mixed fleet of robots from different vendors, let's say 40 different pieces, 40 different items, 40 different robots, it should look at where they all are and optimally identify the workload and the tasks for each of these in real time and keep on reassigning them and so forth. But that reassigning them would be something that the digital twin would do automatically by sending tasks to the fleet controller, for instance. That in terms of market adoption, it's very, very limited today. Very, very, very limited, if at all. Maybe some companies are brave enough to leave some of these autonomous feedback loops live for some very minor tasks. But the vast majority of digital twin applications out there have still a human in the loop execution. So the digital twin is a decision support system that gives recommendations, but then the enactment is still up to a supervisor or manager. And speaking of engineering terms, that is called a shadow, a digital shadow of your operation.
Indeed. I think if you talk about autonomous operations with that feedback loop, of course, you need integration with different kind of systems. So that's probably the tricky aspect of it.
No, for sure.
Okay. How have warehouses changed the way they use software nowadays, or the last few years? Have you seen some changes there?
I would maybe split the software first in more traditional or transactional software, like a warehouse management system, a WMS, and separate the category of optimizers and smart apps. In my team, we like to call them superchargers in a separate category. And if we look at WMS, yes, there is always market for WMS, big, small, and even there we can categorize what's happening and what the clients are doing in again 3 big groups. One, there are still warehouses, probably of a lower complexity, nonetheless, that don't have a WMS at all. They rely on certain ERP features and they run their daily operation as such. Then the second category would be warehouses that run on a legacy WMS, can be 10, 20 years old or more, which of course gives them certain challenges of inflexibility to adapt to modern problems, to modern challenges, to changing customer behaviors, to integrating automation. So there are of course a lot of restrictions around these legacy WMSs. And there are those that use modern, recently migrated or upgraded WMSs that go again under the challenge of the cost of doing so, right? Which kind of brings into the picture that second category I was thinking of, the superchargers. Because if you don't have a WMS or you have a legacy WMS, which is complicated and very costly to upgrade, right? You can deploy these applications standalone or as an affordable way to speed to value, so to speak, integration to your existing WMS. Say in these first 2 categories of no WMS or legacy WMS, expensive to reconfigure or expand. And then maybe the interesting category is where you do have a fresh WMS or you are migrating to a fresh WMS, and then you have these interesting opportunities of the superchargers also on the table. One of the trends that we can think about on the market is the desire to, quote unquote, go back to standard as you migrate to WMS, right? To keep it as close as possible to its vanilla state, off-the-shelf state, and really customize as few processes as possible. And the opportunity there for these smart apps is to allow a WMS, while it's getting migrated or designed to be migrated, to keep as close, at least from the perspective of certain features, right? These smart features we can delve into in a second. But yeah, don't configure them in the WMS. Don't configure would be a big word, but don't develop them into your WMS. Just get a plug and play accelerator that gives your WMS superpowers, basically.
What problems do these superchargers typically solve?
I would call them, as I called them before, I guess, classical problems in logistics. But if it's a classical problem, doesn't mean it's an obsolete problem. On the contrary, they're as actual as possible. A few examples that come to mind: slotting, right? It's a foundational element in warehouse operations. So having the right product in the right quantity at the right location at the right time, and then if you do some orchestration on top for the right resource, right? So it's a 5-star, 5-pointed problem, right? So slotting is one great example. Another one, if you think about our recent example with the person building that palette of complicated orders in that shortest route, is the general topic of cartonization or cubing, meaning optimal placement of products in a box, optimal placement of boxes on a pallet, and optimal placement of pallets on a truck. So different scale.
Yes.
And of course, all the routing in the facility to actually get that done in an optimal way. And speaking of routing, we can also think of, and of course, a lot of WMSs do this to a certain extent of power, also order grouping as well. And some WMSs call that waving. But potentially where the true superpower of these apps comes in function of who you're working with is not having them stand alone, right? And of course you can activate them for different warehouses from your little app store, but also having them work together. That may be giving them a very unique edge. You can have that perfect pallet builder, but working in tandem with your router can start being very interesting. And if you're also running a bit of optimization for your slotting in parallel on a daily basis, weekly basis, depends on the type of business you're in, things can be very, very interesting from a value perspective.
Absolutely. You touched upon slotting optimization. Of course, slotting has so many different angles and perspectives and difficulty levels. Do you think you can, or there is a software out there that yeah, can cover all requirements of slotting for all types of warehouses, or is it like something very specific?
It may be a challenge here of the type of warehouse you're looking at, right? Because of course I'm well educated and a big proponent of the Optioric software as well, right? We've worked together on manual facilities. I think what will be interesting to, in the future, also explore quite heavily is how do you apply that also to hybrid facilities, which have an automated system, but also a manual area or several of each type.
Yep.
Because I'm facing that question in some of my projects today. What should we put in the ASRS, in the automated storage and retrieval system, and how long should we keep it there? Is it just a question of velocity and product dimension that we should put it into an ASRS, or is it more? Right? Is the opportunity for fast movers, in fact, outside or super fast movers, right?
Yep.
Outside of an ASRS, which is often a problem and often a reality that we see. It's better to not put them in there. Sometimes it's better to put them in there. So having a system that can give that type of insights, recommendations, and decision support is truly a golden nugget in warehouse operations.
Okay. Why can't we expect from WMSs to solve this? I know they say they solve it to some extent, but not really to the full extent, But is there a reason for that, you think?
I'm going to give you my assumption. Because I'm not familiar, of course, with the internal organization of all the WMS software development houses, so what are the capabilities in detail. But my assumption is that most, if not all of these optimizers come not from, and I say that with, of course, no disrespect whatsoever, not from pure software development experts. They come from mathematicians, physicians. They often are sourced from the academic world as well, right? So that's the power in those advanced heuristics. And then it starts with a mathematical model, and then it becomes a piece of software. While I would assume, and again, hopefully the WMS experts and vendors watching this one point will not shoot me down, but it is an assumption, it is a perception. I suspect a lot of the software houses come first from a software and a functional space, right? And then delve maybe into more advanced algorithmics, while the scale-ups and the startups coming from the supercharger angle start with a mathematical solution and then move slowly into software development and functional applications.
Makes sense. In terms of time to value, how fast can we see or feel the benefits of warehouse optimization software, you think?
Well, again, I think you saw how I give my answer, so I'm going to split this one in two again. When we speak about benefits, let's split them in operational benefits. So that means on the floor, when can I see improvements on the floor? And split as well the ROI of the investment, right, in the application itself. So if we start with benefits on the floor, in projects we've done, also done together, right? We have seen that. Let's take a couple of examples. For the application where we help pallet builders, right, or pickers that build a pallet in peak situations, right? We measured in our projects a move from 5 to 6 weeks to get an operator to the expected performance, which was the standard before the app, and then once we deployed the supercharger, it got down to 3 to 4, maximum 5 days, right? So that means the app in that particular application was 1 week max to value, right? Then, of course, once you're live with the slotting optimizer and a routing optimizer, well, as of day one, you can start it's not really identifying, and I'll go back to that, but as of day one, you basically, when you're live in a stable model, you can start reaping the benefits. The reason I say live in a stable model is that generally, probably the best way to get into these apps is to first run a pilot, a proof of concept, on a sub-process, on a sub-zone, or a more limited amount of features to really measure and convince the stakeholders involved that there is value in the application. Then you can take it to scale. But once you take it to scale, value comes from day one on let's say, routine daily optimizers, and within a week for those that refer to talent, for example. For ROI, I'm going to give you a very consulting type. It depends on that. And it depends primarily on the level of interfacing you want to do with other transactional systems. So the interfaces you want to build to your WMS, maybe to your TMS, which generally drive cost, well, effort and cost. There, of course, is a benefit to having interfaces in, let's say, the timeliness of using your optimizers, right? Because if you don't have it interfaced, then you may need to do certain extracts of data, imports of data, so you're more in a simulation mode. You're not in a digital twin mode, but if you are interfacing, we were talking just before, right? You are a shift supervisor, you come in the morning, you open up your daily work, and then all the recommendations from your optimizers are there. Or even better, the day before, right? 1 hour before the shift ends, all of your recommendations are in and the plan is there. So there are advantages, of course, to each. Non-interfaced is more affordable, quicker to take live. Interfaced, it's way more proactive in terms of usability than non-interfaced. In which case, I think if you would interface, a good target of ROI should be below the 1 year. If you're non-interfaced, it should be below half that.
Yeah, all right. That's pretty fast. All right, well, one of the questions we often receive from logistics providers, how can we get ready for peak season? Do you have like a standard best practice number of rules you apply at Deloitte, some kind of a framework to guide those people more to answer those questions?
Well, peak season is a tough one because it may pose different challenges to different industries. But I'm not going to give you an it depends this time. I think a very important first step is within the awareness component. Not that it's coming, but what will it entail this year? How will it compare to last year? So it's more the strategic tactical element of preparing for the peak season. How are the volumes going to look like? How are the product portfolios going to look like? And once that is in place, you can start looking at your readiness levels, right? How did we do it last time? What problems did we have last year? The additional volumes or new types of products this year, will we be able to absorb them in the same way like we did last year? We took the automation example. How much can our automated systems take? Shall we do as a service, get more robots, get more people? So you're getting ready to execute. Hopefully one of the lessons learned at the end of the previous peak season is that they can rely on smarter apps to get them ready. Because again, having an optimizer ready in terms of slotting, where do I put all of these things? Every single day, every single shift, depending on how long peak season is. For some companies, it's the famous Friday, right? Or Cyber Monday. Right? That day, how do I do it, right? And how do I do it during the day as well? Hour upon hour, you may need to change these slotting locations. You may need to reallocate people. So in terms of awareness, not only what has been or what is going to come and how am I going to cope with it, but awareness that we can find interesting help in the digital space to actually do it better this year. And my humble opinion is that if they do it once, they're not going to stop doing it in the future either.
Okay.
But it's just, getting that first brave step into that direction.
All right.
And deploying those optimizers as well.
Thanks for sharing those insights. You've been in the warehousing industry for quite a couple of years now. We're 2025. Where do you think the industry will be in 2030 from now? What's your vision?
2030 or longer? Because 2030, we're only 5 years away.
Yeah.
Well, that's okay.
A bit longer then.
A bit longer. I don't believe the classical problems will change. So the problems we spoke about at the beginning of our session, they will always remain there. That maximize customer experience, minimize cost. As the what. The how, I also don't believe large-scale automation is going anywhere. It will only get better. It will only get more reliable. As I mentioned, it's if it's condensed storage, high throughput, you need that still the the golden solution is within large scale ASRS type of automation, which will continue to complement itself or in certain applications be replaced by, depending on that volume situation, by robotics and other types of modular, scalable applications. But I also do expect to see more around the intelligent warehouse. Some call it the smart warehouse, which is perfectly okay. But there you can have, again, very small point-to-point superchargers that we discussed, right? In injecting them into your WMS and TMS ecosystem. But also more fundamental transformations, such as going all in on digital twin, right? Cloning your entire facility, all of your processes, all of your machines. It's doing that orchestration and real-time autonomous optimization. I like to look at it as, you call it a WOS, right? When you introduced the term to me, I immediately thought, a warehouse operating system. But in a way, the end state for, and then maybe you can explain what your WS is, quote unquote, yours. But for me, a digital twinned, fully data-driven, heavily machine working collaboratively with well user experienced, in quotes, from a UX perspective, well attracted operators in the digital era, that do get that smart, constant support and access to information to perform their duties in an exciting way.
Yeah.
I think that should be a pretty exciting feature. So you get that hardware part of things, the physical part of things, which will only continue to evolve and get better. But it cannot really do that without, in my humble opinion, at maximized efficiency without that really smart orchestration layer and the smart apps that come with it.
Makes sense. And we see automation getting more and more traction. Do you think it's a question of man versus machine, or do you think it will be man and machine together in the future?
Most probably, as a hard average, it will be man and machine in the future together. There will be certain processes there are many processes we can fully automate today. We can turn the lights off on those particular processes. Most likely, a lot of them will get automated to a good extent. And it is probable, and of course we spoke about the geography of the application, so there will be certain geographies where it makes more sense to automate and turn the lights off, where others were less. But what is interesting is that the workforce doesn't necessarily in that future disappear and shift outside of logistics, but transforms within logistics. If you take some of the types of technologies we discussed about today, you have a robotic fleet of 50 robots. Maintenance is one, but who manages that fleet? Yes, you're going to have maybe a smart optimizer on top, but somebody needs to teach that optimizer, maybe further optimize the optimizer, right? Be it the supervisor of that fleet of robots, somebody that knows how to reconfigure the processes. So you're moving more from a supervisor of FTE, right, to being an operational engineer of your robotics fleet. That's on the physical side of things, but we spoke a lot about the digital things, right? You have a digital twin of your warehouse, which has all of these sub-modules that optimize, as we spoke, slotting, etc. Well, that needs a product owner, right? That needs, I'm leaving support and maintenance departments, but those also will need to be upscaled, of course, to support this. But yeah, you're changing the layout of your warehouse. You need your product owner or SME, whatever, that goes and makes the necessary updates. You have new products coming in. Maybe you're introducing a new product. You need to, quote unquote, explain to your smart agents what type of product that is, what to do with it, and so forth. So it's really, I think, a partnership, human digital as well, going forward in the warehouse as well.
All right. Thank you so much, Stefan, for sharing all these insights and also the vision on the future with us. So it was a pleasure having you in the podcast.
Pleasure was all mine. Thank you for having me.